Welcome back, folks. I've got my tea here. We're going to have a very relaxed video because I am very excited to bring up tonight's movie. It is the 2008 film Jumper, starring Hayden Christensen and Samuel L. Jackson. Now, before we get into it, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and tell all your friends because I've got quite the doozy on this one. See, I like to think of this movie as Mace Windu coming back to enact vengeance on Anakin Skywalker after he cut off his hands, but the real star of the show, the one that really gets this movie going, is Rachel Bilson as, oh no, it's happening. That's right, kids, it's a full moon and I've become a total Marvel shill. I love everything Marvel. I love Captain Marvel. I love the marvelous Miss Maisel. I love the fact that Lord Voldemort's middle name is Marvolo.
I love
Marvel. Now let's get to it. Television. It's something I don't really bring up much on this channel because I like to focus more on films. I'm more of a movie guy anyways, but I do appreciate the boob tube every now and then. Now with the new MCU TV show, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, available on all of your Disney Plus apps, I'm going to bring my take and rank every series pilot from worst to best when it comes to the MCU TV shows. It's everything that's been released up to August 2022, and I will not be getting into any of the Marvel Netflix shows, nor will I be getting into any of the FX, Fox, mutant shows, because there are so many shows, and if I was going to bring all of those in, the best pilot, of course, would be Legion. Go watch Legion. It is on Hulu, it was on FX, it was great. Noah Hawley, amazing. Have you seen how long this video is? Like, I started with a weird thing already, and what did Shakespeare say? No. Well, yes, he did say that, but he also said that brevity is the soul of wit. Now, before we get into the list, I'd briefly like to talk about television pilots and what they mean to accomplish. As it is the first episode of a television series or a streaming service series, pilots are unique in storytelling as they are meant to establish a world that an audience would like to return to week. Series can flourish or fail based on the strength of a pilot. Hell, the classic ABC series Lost survived a season and a half of floundering based on the strength of that single pilot episode. Pilots are supposed to establish the central characters of the series, the tone and the world, set up the conflict, and leave the episode in a way that makes the audience want to see more. There's a lot more to pilots than just those elements, but let's get on with the episode. It's, getting late. Yeah, sorry all you Falcon and Winter Soldier fans, but the series pilot, New World Order, is a disappointment. And that's strange because the series centers on the two characters that have had the most screen time in the MCU when it comes to the rest of these pilots. And while I'm down on this particular pilot, let's start with some of the good stuff. First of all, the action is pretty on point. The series starts with an aerial sequence where Falcon is chasing a band of mercenaries wearing wingsuits. He has to rescue a guy that they're taking, and he has to fight off a couple of helicopters along the way. And I definitely appreciate bringing back George St. Pierre as Batroc the Leaper, reprising his role from Captain America Winter Soldier. There's a bunch of fun little sequences that utilize all of the equipment there, and some great hand-to-hand combat. And Bucky's first scene is a flashback to his Winter Soldier days, where he has to assassinate a foreign dignitary and his bodyguards, who Hydra apparently doesn't like. This scene reminds us of the brutality that Bucky showed in his earlier films while he was under the brainwashing, and the fact that this scene precedes a scene where he has court-mandated therapy with a VA psychiatrist, social worker, I don't know. It's a really good way of showing the character development that this character has gone through over the course of a decade. But now let's talk about the big issue with this pilot. The characters. The series was presented in the promo materials as this buddy action-adventure series. A buddy show about Captain America's mutual friends. And the thing that makes the best buddy movies work, Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours, Shanghai Noon, is the entirely differing personalities of the two playing off each other. And in this episode, They don't share a single scene together. I can understand that the showrunners want to build their relationship over the course of the series, as well as making sure their first moment of meeting together, sharing the screen, to be an inciting incident type moment that kicks off the action for the series. And it's objectively good to build the personal lives of your titular characters, as we haven't seen them in previous movies. So Sam's sister and Bucky's old friend, that's a nice touch. But the pilot doesn't allow these characters to stand on their own 2 feet. If this series was not tied to the MCU or anything, and this was just submitted to a studio to be greenlit as a pilot, I don't think it would have been made. Without the tie-ins, what's gonna happen in the new Marvel movies, that's why people would like this. That's it. It is riding high off of a year with no Marvel movies and, nothing to do. This was mid-2021, so we didn't have anything else to go with. But why do we care about these characters? Why should we be concerned what happens next? Do these characters even know each other outside of saving the world every couple years? Instead of showing that one scene where the therapist says that Bucky's been avoiding Sam's calls, wouldn't it have been a better, more dramatic moment to show their rocky relationship at the memorial of Steve Rogers rather than just say it in a therapist's office? The pilot relies on the audience's collective empathy towards these characters, and while it does show a small moment that gives us an idea of Bucky's character arc, it's really just jogging in place until we get the Flag Smashers, Wyatt Russell Captain America, and end of episode. Moon Knight's pilot, The Goldfish Problem, is the 5th best or the 2nd worst, depending on how you want to classify that. And it's sad for me because I was hyped for Moon Knight. I read this comic, the entire run, and I thought this would have been a fantastic premise for a series. A real character study where he has to come to terms with himself. It is fantastic. I recommend it. However, this pilot is just a big old J.J. Abrams mystery box. See, the character of Moon Knight is very solidly tied to his dissociative identity disorder in the comics, having his alter egos be distinct personalities inhabiting Mark Spector due to prior trauma, and the question of whether the different personalities is enhanced by the meddling of an ancient Egyptian god is something that the comic kind of wrestles with. So centering the pilot around the personality Stephen Grant and the fake British accent and all is a choice. It's just jarring, and nothing is explained whatsoever. There are good parts to this episode. Ethan Hawke, fantastic actor, he's having a hell of a year. He has this ominous presence that really sets himself up as a pretty interesting villain we might be following. I wish we knew anything about the hero that would be going against him, but, we got other episodes to learn that, right? Not really important with, 6-episode series to know who the protagonist is. The image of Khonshu, the way he's presented, is objectively great. Imposing. Intimidating. Third adjective that starts with I. F. Murray Abraham is the voice, and he is also fun. And the mystery as to what is going on with Stephen is legitimately intriguing. It's a different iteration of Stephen than in the comics, so I didn't know where they were going, and I was genuinely curious. And the fight scene in the European town is actually pretty creative, especially when we're thinking it's from the point of view of Stephen. It starts as action is about to escalate, and it cuts out and you are covered in somebody's blood. It really works. Just the look of knowing that objectively terrible things just happened and you have no idea how it happened, pretty good. But it would have been nice because Oscar Isaac showed a bunch of behind-the-scenes fight training. Would have been nice to see some of that be used in this episode, but I guess we'll have to wait until the next one, or I swear to God, Well, there's not much else good, to be honest. The needle drops are good, if not a bit on the nose, with Wake Me Up Before You Go Go by Wham being played during the fight scene I was just talking about. While this pilot does accomplish one thing that everyone should do, especially in this genre and tone of story. It sets up a mystery that we want to know the answers to. But there is a limit on the amount of questions you can pose to your audience before they start saying, I don't care. Why does Steven lose time? What happened with the goldfish? If he didn't ask the girl out on the date, who did? Why does he have to shackle himself to his bed every night? Who was the big bird skull dude? How was he talking to himself in the mirror? What's Ethan Hawke's deal? Who was on the phone? It's exhausting. The series does get better as it goes on, and the answers are definitely worth the wait, some of them, but in this pilot alone, there's almost too much stuffed into it for anyone to care. We don't even get a good idea of who the protagonist is because Steven, while he's the main character of this episode and arguably the heart of the series, he's not the one making any choices as to what is happening in the series. That's Mark. And he shows up in the mirror once. We don't get a good idea of who the supporting characters are because most of the cast in this episode who have speaking lines that are not Ethan Hawke, they get forgotten by at the latest episode 3, if not next episode. And while we do get a good tonal idea that Ethan Hawke is the villain, we don't know what he wants and why he wants. And we don't know the deal about his tattoo, but it's interesting and it kills people, so I guess we gotta figure out what's going on to find out. Could have been better, should have been better. Next. And now we finally get to the pilots that I actually enjoyed, with Hawkeye's Never Meet Your Heroes. Let's get the bad out of the way real quick. It was overstuffed. There was a lot that could have been condensed into single scenes that happened in multiple scenes. And it leads to the episode ending where the two protagonists finally meet face to face rather than pushing that off to the next episode. Cough, cough, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, cough, cough. I feel like they could have merged a couple of these scenes together and we could have maybe spent a little more breathing room between the action, especially in the second half of the episode, which is super fast. And with the underground auction with typical bad guy rich people, vague Eastern European villains, and the mother-daughter drama, a lot of what happens in this pilot is pretty generic. Hell, even the flashback that starts the series with Kate's parents arguing about money, it's pretty generic language that's used to set up the drama. I mean, we're not supposed to live in that scene very long, so it's excusable, but it's just a thing. And finally, a lot of the confusion that happens in the series and the conflict that is built on the confusion could be explained with a single sentence. Like, Kate is wearing the Ronin armor. She's like in college right now. There is no way that a college kid was globetrotting around the world and killing all of the villains during the blip. She takes off the costume. She's like, I just found the costume. It was at this underground auction my mom's boyfriend's uncle was hosting. But what is done poorly in this episode is eclipsed by all the good that is in this thing. There is some pretty great character development in this series. Kate witnesses the Battle of New York, watches the Avengers, specifically Hawkeye, and her father dies in the event. She decides that she wants to be like her hero and trains herself to be a really good archer. She puts herself in risky situations, and no matter how overwhelmed she might be, she never feels like she's out of her element. And Clint is carrying the weight of the last decade and a half of fighting robots and aliens and Yakuza people, just carrying that trauma around with him. There's a great moment where he's watching the Broadway representation of the Battle of New York, and it's too much for him, so he leaves. It is the psychological wound that he's carrying, as well as the physical wound that he carries, a hearing aid, because being around all those explosions with no suit, that's gonna give you some trauma. Ear trauma, tinnitus. Archer knows about it. It just shows the toll that this character's body has gone through in these fun popcorn movies. And it's a nice little thing that wouldn't be brought up in one of these big movies because nobody cares about the Archer guy. So many people make jokes about the Archer guy, but I like it. Isn't that what we want our heroes to be? They put themselves in risky situations and they carry the tolls for saving the world. It's just a nice character moment giving him a hearing aid because it makes the most human of the Avengers even more human by showing the toll that his body is put through. And also, this series is a great example of the Christmas time crime story genre. Much like Die Hard and my guy Shane Black's films, this pilot sets the tone that it's going to be action-packed. It might go a bit deeper with character emotion and maybe might take a darker turn than you expect. But overall, we're gonna have a lighthearted adventure. You want more about how Christmas can be used for action movies? Watch the video that I've already done on Shane Black and Christmas. I've already talked about it ad nauseum. I'm not gonna do it again. It's right there. Wherever. I'm linking it. I'm not going to repeat myself. You hear? I just won't do it. There's also a dog. It's a good dog. I like the dog. Moving on. Wandavision is the first series that the MCU released, and its pilot, filmed before a live studio audience, is pretty great. Actually, my number 1, 2, and 3 spot in this list are all well regarded. I appreciate them all. The thing that sets Wandavision apart from everything else is that it harkens back to the history of the American sitcom. You could probably write a thesis on the American sitcom through the lens of WandaVision, but that's not what I want to do here, yet. And I don't think that the final episode of the series really has anything to do with it, because it just evolves into a bang bang shoot shoot laser pew of the MCU. But this pilot, it's a complete mind bender. We are just thrust into the black and white color scheme of the American sitcoms in the 50s, and we have no idea why. There is no explanation, and I love it. We know that Wanda and Vision are in the MCU, but they've had this entire relationship growing in the periphery of the main Marvel movies, and the thing is, we also know that Vision is dead, because he died at the end of Infinity War, so we don't know what the hell's going on, especially when he comes in saying, "Honey, I'm home," and you know what? We kind of go with it. It gives us a mystery, one mystery to care about. But apart from just that big mystery of like what the hell's going on, the episode doesn't want to focus on it, at least for the most part. It's mostly just fun wordplay and banter in the style of The Honeymooners. And it has that classic sitcom trope, the boss is coming to dinner, and we got confused as to what that meant, so what's gonna happen? Ooh, crazy things afoot. Elizabeth Olsen fully dives into the antiquated line delivery of those sitcoms that gives this series just the pitch-perfect tone. The canned laughter at every joke adds to the absurdism of the series. The writing in the pilot, when it comes to aping the traditional sitcom tropes, is very spot on, and the mimicry is established almost instantly. And I cannot forget Kathryn Hahn being the archetypical nosy neighbor trope of American sitcoms. Brilliant actress, brilliant performance, fantastic.
This is gonna be a gas!
But when the episode takes a turn, and Vision's boss is choking at the table, and the boss's wife is smiling painfully, just repeating the line, "Stop it." This is when we get to the meat of what this show is. It's got the hallmarks and the production design of a classic all-American sitcom, but throws in an underpinning level of darkness that just says that everything might not be what it seems. We don't know what's happening, the characters don't seem to know what's happening, and the choking goes on pretty long. Almost too long. Not too long in the way that it's tedious. It's too long in the way that it's just an exclamation point for how tense the scene is. And while we are finally going to get an exploration between the romantic relationship between Wanda and Vision, a relationship that has essentially just been lip service in the broader MCU movie timeline, not explored in the slightest, except for maybe a scene at the beginning of Infinity War, but that doesn't count because they both die at the end of it. Spoilers, everyone's seen this movie. It is also going to be a trippy exploration in the history of television, specifically American sitcoms, that anyone who studied film, television, or media studies in college would really like to they're gonna want to talk about it. It was important. That's how I know all this. And finally, in Miss Marvel's Generation Y, we get an origin story that's not just a rehashing of the Iron Man movie. We had Iron Man with wizards in Doctor Strange, we had Iron Man with jokes in Ant-Man, and we had Iron Man but with weird timey-wimey stuff happening, and also it's a lady in Captain Marvel. And in this one we establish Kamala Khan and her supporting cast, her worldview, and how she gets her powers, in a way that is very, very specific to the protagonist of the story. I think that this is objectively one of the better written pilots in the last 2 years, say. It's very, very, very clear on setting up a character's point of view and setting up a character's way of being. We not only establish Kamala, her supporting cast, and the bangle that gives her the power, especially using these animated Kamala's point of view type shots where it's added into the scene, or better yet, fantastical exaggerations of the truth when she's telling stories in flash forwards. It's great. And the way the series establishes the way she gets her powers is very good too. The MCU has been going on for damn near 15 years now, and it has some vigorous fans. People have become obsessed with these characters, these stories, these films. By having the bangle be the personal touch that she adds to her Captain Marvel costume for a look-alike competition in what seems to be not dissimilar to Comic-Con. So we have an Avengers fangirl becoming an Avenger, which makes sense in this universe if these are all public figures. Also, Avengers Con? Aren't the Avengers like a government contractors or something like that? Like, do we have conventions where people dress up as their favorite Navy SEALs or pretend to be in the army or something? Good one. Right, never mind. That totally checks out. The main thing about this pilot that doesn't work, though, is any sort of conflict that does not come from being a teenager or familial or societal conflicts. Now, we know that this show is going to be more than just Muslim high school girl having trouble becoming herself. She's torn between American values and her traditional values and the immigrant story of America. We know that's not just going to be what this is about. It's partially about that, and it's very good at doing that, but we know that there's going to be some sort of, it's a Marvel TV show, we know what's going to happen. And don't get me wrong, the fact of the representation of a conservative Muslim family in New Jersey, it's very good. It's actually probably the best thing about this show. Everyone can relate to overprotective parents, but first-generation Americans apparently deal with this at a different rate because their parents are from a different culture than the one that they are growing up in. So they're in two worlds. I get it, I like it. And having a female Muslim lead as your hero of essentially a story about everyone is pretty great. I mean, that's what the character is, and that's what the character was when she was created. I don't know when she was created, I didn't do enough research for this episode, I am very sorry, this was already long enough. But I do know that this character is one of the first characters created in the last 20 years or so that actually broke through and became a household name. I knew who Peter Parker was because I liked cartoons. I knew who the X-Men were because that's obvious. But like, without being too familiar with the comics, I also knew who Kamala Khan was. But seeing as you only have 6 episodes in this series, when you omit the main conflict from the pilot episode, you only have 5 episodes left to work with. And when you're storyboarding and you know that the 5th episode is going to be 3/4 or at least 2/3 of the episode spent in India in a flashback to her great-grandmother's time, fine, but I had a really great point that I was about to conclude with. Next. No, it's done. I said next. That's right, Loki's pilot, glorious purpose. It's pretty fantastic. It's very fun. I honestly can't find many wrong things about this episode, apart from a few nitpicks here and there, but they don't detract from my enjoyment of the episode. It establishes the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, and the bureaucratic world that this series is going to take place in. And I gotta say, the scene where Loki's told to sign and verify that this is everything he's ever said, straight out of Brazil. It's just Terry Gilliam levels of brilliance. Expressing that this extremely powerful organization that controls the sacred timeline is essentially just a DMV with higher stakes, as if you don't have your take a ticket with you when you are called up, you will be spliced out of existence. It shows their increased adherence to order. And this sets up a natural conflict against Loki's chaotic nature, which allows the audience to be excited to see what will happen next. And the cast? What else can I say? We have Lovecraft Country's Wunmi Musako. I am so sorry about that pronunciation. I feel terrible. We have Black Mirror's Gugu Mbatha-Raw, and we have the Fairly Odd Parents' Timmy Turner himself, Tara Strong. They make nice additions of the supporting cast as Hunter B-15, Ravana Renslayer, and Miss Minutes, a Mr. DNA type exposition machine that is also partially sentient. It's great. And even Eugene Cordero has a fun little bit part where he plays a secretary that has a drawer full of Infinity Stones, which is not only a funny character, genuinely funny character, but it also shows how everything that has led up to this show has now become insignificant because of the existence of this show. It is an example of the shift of power that the new heroes of the MCU will have to go up against. What works remarkably well for this pilot is Loki's speed run of character development. In this series, Loki has been plucked out of the regular MCU timeline immediately following the events of the Avengers. The first one. So he's back to square one. No watching his mother die, no growing closer to Thor, and no sacrificing himself at the hands of Thanos. The guy just last week was doing let's say approximation of a Nuremberg rally. But through the use of technology and the knowledge of how things are supposed to work out, Loki gets a chance to see how his life was supposed to go, moving him to tears. He sees that all of his actions were essentially just done to lead to the character development of other people, whether it's the Avengers, whether it's Thor, whether it's Thanos. He is just a supporting character who has never really done anything of value for himself. It was for other people. And this gives this iteration of Loki an opportunity to change his fate. And finally, let's just say, oh wow. Owen Wilson in a Marvel movie? Wow. But seriously, I love it. The MCU has been pretty solid when it comes to casting. Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Tom Hiddleston, Robert Downey Jr., how can you forget, Scarlett Johansson, and even though people hate her so much online for no reason, well, maybe for a reason, because she doesn't smile enough, Brie Larson is a pretty great representation of what Captain Marvel looks like in the comics. Adding Owen Wilson to be one of the actors to play a character in an MCU role, that's just chef's kiss, That's just Italian. It's so good. It just feels like it's a me Mario, It's great. So that is everything up to She-Hulk. And I have seen the pilot of She-Hulk. I haven't really thought about it too much. I would probably put it in my top half of pilots, maybe number one. That's a little bit of a recency bias, but it's very fun and I enjoy it. I don't want to get too much into it, but I do want to say that those internet assholes who decided to try to review bomb it by giving it terrible reviews before the series was even released because of some apparent wokeness that happened, I think is pretty shitty of you. And I think all of you shitheads deserve to contract scurvy. The video's long as it is, so yeah. That's it. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will make these videos infinitely shorter next time, if you like, share, and subscribe.